Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Drinda Jean Pennini. We're going to be discussing her amazing book, A Path of Grace Forgiveness. Now, it's available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Google Books, people, pretty much wherever books are sold, right? But I want to make sure that I point out her personal website because it's a one-stop shop for everything that she has in store. You want to head on over to graceofforgiveness.org today. You'll be able to find more information on Drinda herself, more information on this fantastic book, as well as find the hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing pages. Because remember, you have to purchase it through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or Google Books, but the website is really where you want to go to start, to gather more information, and also check back in frequently because there's another book that she has in creation at the moment that you're going to want to pick up as well. Again, still in creation, not available just yet, but check back into graceofforgiveness.org frequently to pick that one up the moment it's available. Now, before we go any further, I do want to take this opportunity and point out that Drinda was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by a fantastic advertising firm. And of course, I'm talking about Citi of Books. People, listen to me. If you're a writer and you've written a book, you need help moving it. Well, your questions have been answered, okay? Because Citi of Books has what you need. You're going to want to head on over to citiofbooks.com today. Gather all of the ways that they're going to help assist you because this is what they specialize in. Their team is standing by and ready to maximize your creative endeavors. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure and a wonderful delight to have Drinda here on the line. Now, the moment you start to do research on A Path of Grace Forgiveness, you're going to understand the conversation that's about to happen, the conversation that's about to ensue. But I promise you, you're only going to have an idea. This book is much more than meets the eye, and I'm here for it. It is a wonderful education for you to add to your shelf. Now, it's a powerful narrative about the blessings that accompany you when you learn to forgive. And that's it at its basic form. There is so much here to be gained. And as I mentioned, I'm here for it because I think personally, this is something that we need. Now, you guys know, I talk about this constantly here through People of Distinction, the importance of our human family and how there's so much more that connects us than separates us. And one of those foundational pieces is forgiveness. Because, listen, we know that at one point or another, somebody's going to step on some toes. Somebody's going to ruffle some feathers. And, of course, there's a spectrum to that. And it can go from a very minute thing to something extreme. But the power of forgiveness is something that cannot be overstated. Now, this is a book that is part memoir, okay, because it does take part and really is showcased through her personal experience, through her personal journey. But there is so much wisdom in these words, not only from her journey, but also from the 12 spiritual fundamentals of grace forgiveness. And we're going to get into all of it, okay? We're going to talk more about that. We're going to talk more about her journey, her inspiration, and my goodness, I'm telling you, by the time we've concluded here today, you're going to run to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Google Books, and purchase your copies because you're going to understand how valuable this book truly is. And at the end of the day, don't take my word for it. Take it from her and from her mouth specifically because Drinda is the expert. She's written it. She's lived it. She's going to be able to articulate it. Drinda, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest with us today. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, and thank you. It's an honor to be on your program.
Well, listen, thank you for the kind words. The honor is all ours, Drinda. We're really looking forward to this. Listen, I meant what I said in my opening. I think what you're doing here is special. And it's something that oftentimes we don't realize the importance of forgiveness just from the simple standpoint of the weight that gets lifted from our shoulders when we do forgive someone. Oftentimes, we view it from the standpoint of, speaking from my own experience. I remember when I was much younger, Listen, when I was upset with someone, like I didn't want to forgive them just because I thought that I was holding something against them. And it wasn't until I did and I realized, my goodness, the burden that felt lifted through that forgiveness helped me. And that was something that I had to experience to learn from. But I'm hoping that we can help open some people's eyes here. And I know that you're doing just that with this magnificent book. Before we go into the words on the pages, Drinda, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay. I like to say I have a bit of a gypsy soul. I've lived a very blessed life as God's been really good to me. I love traveling and doing mission work, which has taken me to around 40 countries, from Egypt to Mount Everest. I really believe it's essential that we give back in gratitude. So next month, we're heading to Panama to build stoves for the indigenous mountain people. And another thing about my life is that because of an extremely painful personal experience, I facilitated forgiveness workshops for quite a few years. And my background includes corporate work, owning restaurants, creating a consulting company, and working for a nonprofit. My life has been a great adventure.
People, I'm telling, listen, I love the opportunity that I'm given here because, of course, the name of the network is People of Distinction, and we stand by that through and through. I mean, Drinda is no exception to this, an absolute embodiment of those words. I love that. We're going to have to invite you back on the network, Drinda, because your background is amazing, okay? And I'm sure you have stories for days. We would love to hear.
Oh, I have stories.
Well, thank you very much for sharing. Of course, The Anchor is all about your fantastic book, A Path of Grace, Forgiveness. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, it's really based, like I said, on the spiritual fundamentals of grace forgiveness, but it describes kind of my perspective on the power of forgiveness and redemption. And shared in the book are my intimate experiences, personal experiences, about granting and seeking forgiveness, as my husband of, at that time, 25 years, had his first affair, and 10 years later had a second one, which happened to be with a very close friend. So I know about betrayal. But yes, we are still married, and our relationship is actually very good. Like a phoenix rising out of the ashes, we built a new relationship through the spiritual fundamentals. And the fundamentals are like a road sign on a rocky path. And they kind of lead us from where you start, which is denial, saying, hey, you know what, I don't really see a problem here, even though things are not good. And eventually, by following them, what you come into is a state of transcendent peacefulness. And because of this, and that we seek forgiveness of self and others, it is truly by the love and compassion of Christ. And for me, using the fundamentals was a very powerful and transformative process, which really helped me to grow spiritually and to see a lot of enlightenment in my journey. However, I will say, the reader does have free will to choose any of the fundamentals that work. They don't all for everyone. They all worked for me, but there is no perfect and right path. It's just one that gets you where you want to be. So there are practical applications, there's tools, there's methods for moving forward, how to leave connections to hurtful people and events, and these enable us to change our lives. But they only work when you employ their practice. So the caveat for the reader is, unless you take action by applying the principles of the fundamentals, nothing will change, and you will continue to languish in emotional bondage to the past. And that's not a fun place to be.
Absolutely. Listen, you said a mouthful there, Drinda, because of course we know, right? Listen,
was that too much?
No. I mean, you said a mouthful, meaning like there is so much in what you said that was wonderful. Absolutely. Listen, you said just enough. Because, listen, people, we understand wisdom without action. I mean, really, where are we without that, right? I mean, let's be honest here. You know, Drinda, a fantastic segue that you've established here for us. We know that the book covers, as you stated, the 12 spiritual fundamentals of grace forgiveness. Well, for someone that's new to this and, you know, just throwing myself under the bus first and foremost, this is not something I'm familiar with. And I'm sure there's probably some of our listening audience that isn't either. Can we go into a brief description of what those fundamentals are and maybe talk about one or two of them so we have a greater understanding?
Sure. Yeah. So the spiritual fundamentals are when my husband had his first affair and we worked through things and I thought life was good, but I started teaching forgiveness workshops. And then when he had the second one, I was shattered. And I've always been a pretty good Christian. I've had my times leaving and coming back, but it's been a journey for me that I value significantly.
Yeah.
So as I was dealing with this, he was living in California, I was living in Texas, we were getting a divorce. I really turned to God for how do I get through this? And that is how the fundamentals came into being. Now, when I was writing the book, I'll have to say, I argued with God quite a bit.
Yeah.
I started with 10, and God said, no, there's 12. And I said, no, there's 10. And that went on for a while. So, God and I have a great relationship, but I'm known to argue and think sometimes that I know more than he does. Well, and he always wins. But so as I went through through the thing, they weren't called the fundamentals back then. They were just all the things I went through to get to the state we're in now, where we have, and everybody who knows us will tell you this, we have a really good marriage. And that's surprising sometimes to people, but that's what real forgiveness, what I call grace forgiveness, is when you have no emotional connection to what happened in the past.
Yeah.
And so the fundamentals start with denial, what I call it the celestial war. And that's really the crusade of what I call veracity versus deception. That's when we look at something outside of ourselves and believe that it's right and our own instincts are wrong, or that our faith tells us one thing and the world tells us something different. Mm-hmm. And as I was going through denial, and I kept saying, I'm not in denial, turns out I sure was. And I created a matrix. So that's in the book, and it shows, I won't go into how it works, but for people who say, well, I don't think I'm in denial, okay, fill it out and see where you are. Because you have to start there. If you're still in denial that everything's perfect, then the rest of the fundamentals are worthless to you. And, it goes through a lot of them, including how to let go of things. I call that trust God to lift burdens. But I have exercises, physical things that you do to let go of all of these things that give you anger, bitterness, and connection. It's what I call emotional bondage. And so I had to work through a whole lot. And the key was I began to see that there was no such thing as my husband bad, me good, because I had some part in it, which I had to receipt for. Nobody's perfect. And a lot of times in relationships, when there's a betrayal, the relationship was on shaky ground. Mm-hmm. Not always, but frequently. And so, I went through how to set boundaries. And, a lot of these things are practical things that everybody can do on a normal basis. But I spell them out. And one of the things I consider critical is what I call covenant of gratitude. And that is, when we go through things like this and we come out the other side better than we came in, that we do need to be grateful for those blessings. For me, a tough one is surrender and conscious obedience. That's me arguing with God and thinking, well, I know where I'm going, and that may not be where I'm supposed to go. And the last one is what I call transcendent peacefulness. And that is when we know the joy of God's peace and it transcends our physical existence. That is where we're transported. Our spirit is transported beyond the scope and range of the physical human existence, and it catapults us into a state of quiet tranquility, resting in that gentle peace. So that's in a nutshell, kind of a quick and dirty up the fundamentals.
Well, isn't that's a pretty big nutshell there, Drinda. I love it. People, honestly, the only word that I can think of is wow. Because I'm sitting here as I listen to her speak, and I know you all are as well. And I'm shuffling through a Rolodex of memories and experiences, and I'm thinking of times where I wronged someone, or other times when someone has wronged me, and the process through it. And people understand that it is a process, okay? By no means, listen, there's no judgment here. But how many of us have been in a situation where we were wronged by someone, or we wronged someone, and then, we forgave them, or quote unquote forgave them, but then later on down the line, we used that particular experience against them. Well, did we really forgive them? Did we really get past it? We're still holding on to certain things. And again,
Yep.
no judgment whatsoever. It is a process. But acknowledging it, right? That's why she said, and I'm so glad she did, that very first one is denial, right? You need to acknowledge it. And there is so much to it, people. There are steps here. You got to head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Google Books. Check out graceofforgiveness.org. Pick up your copies. I'm sold already, and we're about halfway through. Okay, you know where you got to go. You know what you got to do. It's called The Path of Grace Forgiveness. You need to pick it up. Drinda, next question here, and I probably should have started with this one, but I'm so glad I didn't, because now it's really an icing on the cake here. I know why I think forgiving someone is important, but I want to hear it from you. Why is forgiveness needed?
Well, I'll tell you from two perspectives. The Christian perspective is that forgiveness is not about the other person, usually. It's about your personal relationship with Jesus. So that's from a Christian point of view. From a little less esoteric point of view, if we live in unforgiveness, then we are holding on to anger and bitterness.
Yeah.
And here's what happens. When you stay angry and bitter, and bitterness is the worst, it seeps into your heart first, and you see everything colored by a glass of bitterness. And eventually, that bitterness and anger will annihilate your soul, and you live as an empty shell, angry about everything and seeing no joy in your life. That's why forgiveness of self and others is absolutely critical to have a life with some joy and peace in it.
I love this. People, I'm telling you, there's wisdom here for days, okay? You need to head on over and pick it up. Curiosity for myself here with this next one, Drinda, but what would you say was a highlight for you in this process? Or maybe highlight has the wrong connotation. What was something that surprised you that you weren't anticipating before you began?
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you, is after working through everything, forgiving myself for my part in it, forgiving my husband, putting our family back together, I realized that I had forgiven the other woman, both times, but the second time was when we were getting a divorce. So I got on an airplane and I flew to California and I went to see her, and I walked up to her and said, I just have to tell you that I forgive you for what happened between you and my husband. Wow. There was enough pain to go around for everyone involved, and really it's time for all of us to move on. I pray for you and I wish the best for you. I have no bad feelings towards you. And I hugged her. Now, every year when we go back to California for a golf tournament, I see her, we talk, I check up on her, she checks on me. We have a very cordial relationship. That is what grace forgiveness is. When you can walk up to someone who you feel was paramount in your life being crazy and hurtful, etc., and you can say with your heart being earnest, I forgive you, I pray for you, I care for you. Mm-hmm. That feeling is the most uplifting, elevating, and spiritual experience that you're going to have. It really changes your entire life and your perspective on how you can rise above petty feelings and anger and frustrations and move to that level of forgiveness.
Yeah. Drinda, touching on your writing process with this next one, still connected to the book, but from a writing perspective, I think this is really for all artists out there listening in, but especially for my new writers. Because we understand from an art perspective, there when it comes to our creation, we can tend to be very close to it, right? It's very sensitive to us, and they're almost like children that we've given birth to and released into the world, and you never know how it's going to be received. And there is always, of course, some uneasiness that comes with it. Speaking for my own self as my artistry unfolds. But this is twofold for you, because it's not only about the work of art that you've created, but it also encompasses a lot of your personal story. So, Drinda, how do you handle the vulnerability that comes with sharing your work with the world, particularly when it touches upon such personal experiences and emotions?
Well, actually, about the book itself, I call it usually the book, not my book. The book is dedicated to Jesus. And so I consider this God's book, not mine. And so when I worked with an editor, a lovely woman who did a fabulous job and, made huge changes that really were good, she was surprised because she used to be an editor. And she said, you're not thin-skinned and sensitive. You took all my suggestions and went with them. I said, because this book needs to be God's message, not mine. Now, yes, I have part in it, and I used God's ideas and, my words, but I really am not sensitive, and I don't feel vulnerable because everything that happened was raw, honest, and truthful. And so if you come from a place of knowing that everything you were saying is truthful and that your heart is right, then you don't have to worry about what other people think. If nobody likes it, that's okay. I feel that, I was sort of like, for me, a journey that I wanted to share with anyone who wanted to hear it. But if they don't, and they don't find the fundamentals useful, I'm okay with that because it's honest.
Oh, yeah. Listen, can we just talk for a second and point out the maturity and bravery that comes along with this? Because people are like, again, my hand is raised. I'm going to speak from my own perspective. But we all understand how difficult it is sometimes to look in front of the mirror at ourselves and acknowledge certain things that we don't like or things that have happened that we would rather sweep under the rug. To take it a step further and to create this literary window of sorts for others to peer in and be able to witness some of those. My goodness, that takes bravery and courage on another level. And I know she's not looking for praise, but I'm going to give it to her regardless. Because Drinda, my goodness, you are incredible. Okay, you are magnificent. And not only going through this journey and having the strength to overcome it and surpass it. And I'm sure that, listen, even though you've done your work, I'm sure it's a journey, right? And there are certain days that are probably better than others. But then to take it a step further and understand that so many others are going to find wisdom and benefit through your words. You are, as I said it before, I'm going to say it again, you are the truest embodiment of a person of distinction, and we are honored to have had you on our network to discuss this. Yep. People, this is one book, okay? There's another one on the horizon. If you're like me, you're at the edge of your seat, and you're already heading on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Google Books. You're checking into her personal site, graceofforgiveness.org. And you're looking into everything that she has in store. And if you're not, you're asleep because there's really no other reason for it. You have to head on over there, pick up your copies. There's another book on the horizon that you're going to want to pick up. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go into a synopsis of that other one. But I promise you, it is just as valuable. These are wonderful books to add to your shelf. They're even better gifts to add to someone else's. You know where to go. Pick up your copies and get lost in them. You can thank me later. Drinda, this has been an absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you very much for having me. It truly was an honor, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity. God bless you.